Hello again, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of Angular 0 to 100, brought to you by Sri Lanka in collaboration with Ascentic. This second unfolding out of 10 sessions is titled Breaking into Angular Components. Here we will be taking a deep dive into Angular components from the component lifecycle to creating Angular elements, and a really awesome demonstration that has been set up for us as well. So this will showcase each concept discussed in today's session. Furthermore, in case any of you needs to revisit session number 1 and the concepts discussed there in the first episode, be sure to visit the Sri Lanka GitHub account where you will find the repository of our first session, Introduction to Angular. It consists of the resources utilized in the very first session. So moving on with today's agenda, let me introduce today's speaker to you. He is a seasoned professional of the software development industry with 12 plus years of industry experience in the .NET stack and front-end technologies accumulated over multiple domains, such as finance, healthcare, and game development. Having worked at some of the most prominent software development companies in Sri Lanka, he is currently leading the front-end development team and overlooking DevOps at LB Finance. Please welcome Rukshan Dangalla, today's speaker for Breaking into Angular Components. Rukshan, the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Bilal. So that was quite a warm welcome. So let me straight go to the uh, agenda that we are going to talk about today. So I'm so happy to be here, guys, presenting in Sri Lanka. So in this today's session, we are going to talk about Angular components, basically. So first, we are going to talk about component life cycle and how you can create components. And in second, we are going to talk about view encapsulation and how you can interact with components. Basically, that's one of the most important thing in components, like sending inputs and emitting events output from component and interact with each other. And then we are going to talk about content projection, dynamic components, and finally we are going to touch about Angular elements. And then as the final step, we are going to work on application that involving these each concepts. So let's look at the final demo. So are we in the right place or are we in right slide? Because we just started the session and now I'm working on like I'm looking at a final demo. So let me quickly show you what you're going to work on today. So in that way, so your adrenaline will pump up and you will pay more attention to slides, right? Let me quickly go to the demonstration. So this is what we are going to create. So this is basically, I just name it NG Spotify, and it contains these categories from Spotify. Actually, I'm calling the Spotify API and retrieve these data. And you can see that each data looped in the grid. And if you look at quickly, I hope that everyone aware of browser console. If you look at network tab, if you refresh this, you can see that there's API call for API Spotify, and you can see that preview data coming from there. So these are the things that I looped through in this grid and create a component from this list. And if you click on one, let me go to console again. And if you click on one category, view more, so you can see that another API call file, and then you can see that relevant list getting loaded here, playlist. And let's say hip hop, you can see some other list getting loaded. So this is basically the main view, it's one component, and the sidebar, it's another component. Actually, it's creating multiple items in here. And if you if you look at this top header, so it has this no playlist selected. So So this is another component, basically. It's a header component. So if you click on category, and hopefully it doesn't have any playlist, let's go to this one. So today's topics, if you click on this play button, now you can see that the top header component getting changed. So basically this is two components in different hierarchies, component hierarchies, but it's communicating each other. So this kind of demo that we are going to talk about, like we are going to create if time permits. Otherwise, I can go through each and every step that I took to create this application. Right, let's dig into Angular components. So basically, Angular components are the main building blocks for Angular application. So each component contains a HTML template and a TypeScript class that define the behavior of that component, and CSS selector, and optionally you can add styles for that particular component. When it's come to component, HTML template and CSS selector is the essential. Like you have to add those to create component. So in a while, let's see how you can create components. So there are actually two ways that you can create component in Angular. One, create component manually. So to demonstrate that, let me quickly open up a demo app that I created. Here. So if you are not sure about how to create Angular app using Angular CLI, I think you can have a look at the first session that we had. In the first session that we talked, we talked about very clearly how you can install Angular CLI and how you can create Angular application using Angular CLI. So here I just created a simple application using Angular CLI, ng-new command. So if I go to the slide again, so basically this is the steps that I'm going to take. Navigate to my Angular project and create new file. So here that you may have to focus on naming conventions. If you are creating a component according to Angular guidelines, you should end with component.ts. So that's it's a good practice to follow those guidelines, and then you have to add component decorator, component import, and then component decorator. Then choose the CSS selector and the HTML template and the style. So these are the things that I'm going to do. So here in app, maybe like you already aware that the project structure of Angular CLI generated project, source folder, it's there, it's app, assets, environments, things like that. And you can see the package JSON, things like that. So here I'm going to create inside app, you can see this app module. So module is a kind of a bundle module, bundle together these component services, directives, things like that. It's bundled together, app module. And the bootstrap part happening in main TS file. So you can get more knowledge on these if you look at first session in Ng-SriLanka, this Angular 0 to 100 series. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to create a simple component. Actually, you don't need the HTML file, separate CSS file, things like that to create component. If you look at this app component also, this is also another component. It came out of the box from the Angular CLI generator project. So here you can see the selector, the template URL, the style URL, things like that. But here, actually, you don't need HTML, CSS, or these two files. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create simple file, and I'm going to name it comp.overview.component. Yeah, right? And then I'm going to add the component decorator. So for a component, we should add component decorator. Right? It's coming from Angular core package. And in here, now, when it's come to component, we should create TS class relevant to that. Export class. I'm going to name it comp overview component. And here you can see that two errors coming up here. That because when you're defining a component in component decorator, you have to set the CSS selector and the template. Those are the mandatory two properties that you have to set in here. I'm going to set the selector as comp overview here, and template. Actually, you can see that two things coming up. It's template and template URL. One template that you can define it inline. So basically, if it's a very simple component, you don't have to reference another HTML file for that. You can add inline HTML in there. So I'm going to do that. In here, I'm going to say H1. And I'm going to close that tag. And that's pretty much it. That's all you need for a component, right? So now I'm going to save it and then going to app module. So another important thing that you have to keep in mind that when you introduce new component to your Angular application, you have to register it in your app module. So if it's a some complex Angular application can contains multiple modules, but make sure that you register your component in one of these modules, relevant module. So how you can do that? To do that, what you need to do in the declaration part of app module, you can add the created component, comp overview component, this one. So now it got registered here. Right. Let me quickly run the app.
Rukshan, can we have a moment, please?
Yeah.
Seems like some actually cannot see the screen.
How
Okay,
about
some
now?
actually can and some cannot. Um, yeah, so for those who could not see the screen, I hope it is visible. Okay. We can continue, Rukshan. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Right. So now I'm going to look at the application it's running. It's 4,200. Actually, when you run Angular application, it's coming. You can actually change the default port, but in default, it's running default 4,200 port. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to in app component HTML, I'm going to add that component, the newly created one. So I'm named the selector. I put it as comp overview. So I'm going to just copy it and I'm going to paste it here as a tag, same as the H1 tag, or H2 tag, H3 or span div, same as in the same way. So let me go to the screen. Now you can see it's coming up. Hello from component. So the nice thing about this hot reload, there are two ways actually doing it. It's there's a hot module replacement HRM. Some other frameworks follow that, but here it's hot module replace. It's hot reload. Uh, if you go to the component and change the hello from, like, I just remove this and save it. And now you can see that it getting reloaded, and it's automatically, you can see that it got removed from the rendered view. So that's pretty much it, like creating a, component in a manual way. Right? I'm going to stop the server. I'm going to stop the application, and that's how it's done. And the other thing that we can do, go back to the slide again. So these we just follow these 8 steps. And this is the like, I mean, like, easiest way of creating Angular component. Like, if you have Angular CLI installed, then you can use Angular CLI command to generate component, services, directives, things like that. So basically the command is ng generate component and the component name. So in short terms, like you can use ng g c and the component name. So if I go to Visual Studio Code again, while I'm selecting the demo app, this is the place where that I created this demo application. In here, I'm going to create new component, ng g c stands for component, and new. I'm just creating new. I'm just specifying the name as new. So let's see what will happen. So now it got created 3 files, and app module also got updated. So if you look at this, there's a folder called new component. In there, you can see the new component HTML, CSS, the testing file, and the TS file. And also in the same time, so if you remember that when I create a component manually, I had to go to app module and update it manually. But here, it automatically got updated when you generating a component from Angular CLI. So this is the basic stuff, guys, the way that you can create Angular component in Angular ecosystem or Angular application. So let's go back to our presentation. So now we are going to talk about Angular lifecycle. So when it's come to lifecycle, a component instance has lifecycle that start with Angular creating the component and till it's removed from the DOM. To demonstrate these states, basically, it has these kind of states when it's come to starting from the beginning to the when it's come to removing from the DOM. There are several stages involving in here, initialization, ng on changes, things like that. If Right, these are the component life cycle. So if you remember that when we creating Angular component, we added a class, TypeScript class. So in there, the constructor is the first one. This is the very first part getting invoked when Angular creates a component. Then if there are any input parameters, we are going to talk about input parameters in a while. So in this, if there are any input parameters, a parent component or some other component trying to send some data to Angular, the newly created component, then ng on changes getting executed, getting invoked. Then ng on init, then ng on init after the first ng on changes. It's actually getting executed only once. So this is the ideal place if you are to call API and retrieve some data from the backend. This is the ideal place that you have to hook into. So in that way that you can hydrate your properties, hydrate your objects, and pass into the view. And finally, ng do check. This is where that every time when change detection happen, this method getting invoked. So let's say that if you want to implement custom change detection action, then this is the right place. In here, you can create your custom change detection logic. And then there are four other uh, events, lifecycle hooks, ng after content init, ng after content checked, ng after view init, and ng after view check. These are basically when after component getting initialized, after ng on init, then these are the lifecycle hooks getting executed sequentially. And finally, when you try to remove one component from the DOM, this method getting executed just before the directive is destroyed. So you remember that directive stand for that that we used app comp something like comp overview in the first demo. So this is when we try to remove that directive, this ng on destroy will get invoked in these lifecycle hooks. So to demonstrate these, I'm going to use some external a tool. So actually, maybe like you may already aware of this. Let me quickly show it to you. It's Stackbits, guys. So here it's not related to Angular as well. It's not so you can create many type of projects in here. The cool thing about this that you don't have to install Angular CLI or any other dependencies in your local machine. So it just browser based, and you can start coding. You can start working on rapid prototyping or something like that. It's very easy, and there are many if you want it the same as if you want to install any other third-party dependency from package node modules, so you can do the same. So it's very easy. So here I'm going to open up previously prepared one of this a project to showcase the life cycle. So I created a separate, so if you look at this left pane, it contains same as the project. If you create one project in Angular CLI, it's same as this structure, but some of files you can't see it in here since this is a browser based. And another cool thing that I want to point out that you can see that connect repository in here. So it means that if you are signed in with the GitHub account, then when you click on this, it will automatically connect to your GitHub account and create a repository and push all these files. So it's very easy, and you don't have to worry about that you are going to lose the changes that you did. So here I'm going to open up the console and I'm going to clean it up and refresh it here. So let's see, these are the methods getting invoked. And if you go to TS file, so you can see on changes, on init, do check, things like that. So all these lifecycle hooks, I added those with a simple console log. So better, it's better to, it's easy to understand what's going on. So first thing you can see that inside the constructor. So this is the first one getting executed, constructor. And I have this data, and I'm manipulating it using these two buttons. And then I have another one input parameter date from parent. So because I have that, this ng on changes getting executed. Data from parent is 10. If I remove this, let me go to app component HTML. You can see that data from parent. I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to refresh it again, clear it and refresh it again. So then we can have a better understanding what's going on. Now you can't see that ng on changes in here. The moment that I put here, now you can see ng on changes. Data from parent is 10. So that's how ng on changes works. And if I do some manipulations in here, you can see that ng do check and ng after content checked, ng after view check. This lifecycle hook getting executed, same as this. So these are the basically main lifecycle hooks that we talked about. I hope you got some understanding about this, and maybe like this kind of like overwhelming at the moment. But if you get used to this, and when you start using, when you start working on Angular, so then these kind of life cycle hooks, you get used to it, and without these, maybe it's very hard to work on Angular. Right. Let me go back to the presentation. So these are the things that we talked about. And now we are going to talk about view encapsulation. What is view encapsulation? So when it's come to Angular, it's optional that we can provide styling for that particular component. But let's say that if you are using same classes in two different components, or like many components, so there can be style leaking from one component to another. So it's styles getting override by another component style. So to prevent this kind of scenarios, this kind of issues, Angular team came up with this view encapsulation options. Basically, it means when you select, when you add some styles to a particular component, those styles stays only for that component. Even if you use the same class, same way in another component, those styles not getting applied in other components. So basically, there are three available encapsulation options. One, shadow DOM, and this is enclosed components view inside shadow root. Actually, this is working only the shadow DOM compatible browsers. And this is the recommended and default mode. It's view encapsulation emulated. So in this way, it modifies the component CSS selectors. And finally, view encapsulation none. So this means that we are telling Angular not to encapsulate styles. So basically, I'm just demonstrating this. Otherwise, it's always good to use view encapsulation emulated. Let me quickly go to Stackbits and show you other demo. This is a view encapsulation. And here I have two components. So one component with the same class card header, and other component has the same class as card header. And here style CSS, this one, this style sheet's applicable for entire application. But when it's come to these CSS files, it's only relevant for this particular component. Now you can see, even though I named these classes card header, same class, same CSS class, but this style is not leaking from one component to another. So in here, I marked it as green, and the second one I marked it as font color red. But it works as expected. So if I quickly go here and add the encapsulation none into component decorator, and then I'm going to edit the same thing in here as well. Now you can see both these headers got red. That means that it's leaking from one component. So that's basically view encapsulation, not a big deal, basically. So I hope that you got some understanding about that as well. Let's quickly go to our presentation. So now it comes to a very important part of Angular ecosystem, and Angular application, talking to each other. So component interaction. So let's say that we have one component as a parent. In parent, we inject, we put another component as child. And here we have another sibling component. So sometimes we may need to talk to components in way that parent to child communication, child to parent, and sometimes without like any relationship, maybe like two different component trees, we may need to talk to each other from this child to this sibling maybe. So in that way, there are ways of communicating in Angular components. So let's dive into it. So first thing, it's a very simple one, parent to child component, parent to child data passing. The most common and straightforward way of doing it using at input decorator. So this is in this way that you can pass data via template. So let's quickly go back to Stackbits. Guys, I'm using Stackbits because it's very easy. Otherwise, that you can do the same with Angular CLI generator project using commands and things like that. Let me go to Stackblitz component interaction example. So in here, app component HTML, you can see that there are three folders. Basically, these three folders stand for three types of communication. One input, and other one is output, and other one is a view child. So in input component, if I go there, you can see there's an input decorator with a child message property, the string type in here. So if I go to component HTML, in here, I used that component. And I'm passing data as a template. So put parent. You can see it coming here. So basically what's happening, here you have input decorator with a variable. And when you bind it in here, in the app component, you pass some data to the child component. That's how it works. So I think it's pretty straightforward. And let me go to the second one. Now we talked about parent to child sharing data via input. Other one is child to parent sharing data via view child. So here, if I go to view child, in here you can see that I'm not using any decorators like input or output. Here I have message property that assigned some string in here. And when it's go to HTML component, here I'm going to uncomment that. Now you can see that message coming from the component. So if I go to component TS, you can see that view child is view child. So I'm using a view child component. This is the one that I created in here. This is the one. So I'm using this at view child decorator, and then simply accessing the message inside this file, inside this component, using this .child.message. Yeah, I should be able to see the IntelliSense as well. I'm not sure about it in here, but yes, if you install Angular services as an extension in your VS Code, then you should be able to see these kind of IntelliSense messages, auto completions in your TS files. Right. So this is basically view child interaction, how you can pass, how you can retrieve data from child to parent using viewChild. Let me go to app component HTML and commit it out. And let me go to the next type of interaction. It's child to parent sharing data via output. So basically, this is another way of sharing data using at output decorator. This is ideal for if you have one button or behave based on user's action. Then you have to pass data to the parent. In that way, for those kind of scenarios, it's very easy to use this type of interaction output, emitting output. So let me go to Stackbits and uncomment this. So if I go to output, this is another component that I created. Output component. In output component, I have output decorator. So this name nothing to do with the decorator. I just named it as output component. That's all. And output component, it contains event emitter. So here we emit the message. So here, if it's a Boolean value, what we need to do is we have to change the value to Boolean. So let's quickly do that and see. First, let's see how it works. Send message. And now you can see hello from child. Actually, this coming from the child. If you look at component TS, there's a message. And in the HTML, this is the app output. If you remember that the CSS selector for output component, and we have method message event method, and this is the receive message. This is the message event that our event emitter, and here we have receive message method, and it get parameters from here. So then finally the value get assigned to this message, and it shows on the parent component. That's how it works. So let me quickly change this one. I'm just going to add a number in here, maybe like something like this. And if I going to emit number, so that event emitter should be number. Right now, if I click in here, you can see the 12 come up here. So it's very straightforward way of communicating with each other components. Let me quickly go to other type of communication. So like I said, there are sometimes unrelated components. Components live in two different component hierarchies, render trees. So in that way, that let's say that you have a child, grandchild, something like that, then you may able to pass data between these components using output, input, things like that. But when it's come to two different trees, it's very hard to use input and output. In that way, we could use service. So basically, in coming sessions, we are going to talk about reactive programming in Angular with RxJS. So RxJS playing a big role in here when it's come to services, shared services. What we can do, we can add one service for one component hierarchy, or we can use one service for entire application. In that way, we can pass data from like one component from footer to header, things like that. So if it's not even related in component hierarchy, it's very easy to pass data using service if it's available for the entire application. But there are design patterns that we can use one service related to one module, or one service related to only one set of components, component hierarchy. In that way, that you can communicate only within those components. If you're registering one particular service for one particular components, then you may not be able to send messages across the application. And there are design patterns, things like that. But it's good to keep in mind that there are way that you can communicate with each other, even though they are unrelated, using services. So in the main demo, I'm going to showcase one of these kind of service that you can send data across the application. Let's go to next part. So component content projection. So component content projection is a pattern that if you remember that that we add simple tags, selectors in app component HTML. So we didn't put anything inside or like between that tags. So here we can, what we can do, we can project content in Angular components. So basically there are three ways of doing it. One, single slot content projection. Other one is multi-slot content projection. And finally, conditional content projection. So let me go to Stackbits and show you some demo in content projection. Here we go. And if I go to component HTML, I'm going to so there are two components. One CP basic. Actually, this is a simple component. It doesn't contain this HTML or CSS file. So if you look at this component, so it has a selector app CP basic, and the template as this one. There's a H2. It's a hard-coded one for the component, and here we have a holder for dynamic contents, like projected contents. So ng content, we put it here, and this tick mark that if you put this, you can add multi-line markup lines like this. So you don't have to use a plus button or like a string concatenation in here. So let's go to app component HTML, uncomment this. I'm going to comment the below one. So put multiple projections. So here you can see this is content projection cool, this one. So actually I'm sending this from the parent to the component, but this is where it getting rendered. So ng content here, this is the way of doing content projection. And this one, if you go to the second one, and in here, you can see that multiple contents. So this actually in here, this is the hard-coded one, and the default one, ng content. Now you're familiar with ng content. Here we have another one, multiple another additional slot for another additional content projected from the parent. So how it happened? So here it we have question attribute, and if I go to component HTML, in here you can see that question attribute over here. So that's how it identified, Angular framework identified this content, this part of string should go to this section, ng content. And in the same as this, there are ways that you can conditionally check content, projected content, and render it in the view. So I'm going for the presentation. And now we are going to talk about dynamic components. I'm going to quickly cover the dynamic components because it's like without specifying the component, maybe like adding it in the HTML file, you can dynamically inject these components in TS level. So it's very handy when it's come to, let's say that you have backend service coming from some sort of API. In that API, you have fields defined for your form. So upfront, you don't know what's your forms looks like, what are the fields going to be. But from the API, the service JSON response, you are going to define your component, your field set. So when it's come to that kind of scenario, these dynamic components is very useful. Let me quickly go to Stackbits, and I loaded up another sample project for that. Actually, if you see this, this is another type of project. This is not Angular project, but it's a Node project. So you can see that it's running everything in the browser. Till it getting loaded, I'm going to open it up and explain it to you. So here we have add service. So we may, while talking about other components, other modules in Angular, we may talk about services as well. But here, this simple service injected for this application, and it's sending. If you look at this, it's sending the component as a as an object here. So add item. So here you can see it's coming from this component, the hero profile component, hero job add component. So here in the app component, it simply call the service and get ads. In here, app add banner. So in ads, there's a directive, add directive, and add host. In here, add items. When you assign something to ads, it getting populated. The main, the key thing takeaway from this is hero profile component, and hero job add component. These are not created in HTML, so it's coming from service. So that's how you can work on dynamic components. Anyway, so these created the projects and also the sample application and everything, we are going to share it once this session is over. So then you can have a proper look at these projects. Now, final thing about we are going to talk about Angular elements. So basically, Angular elements is another a very important thing. It's related to web components. So right now, when you define component in Angular application, in your Angular application, to let's say that you define CSS selector as app component. So to identify that tag app component, you should run it in Angular Angular ecosystem, or like you should add Angular framework in the browser. You should run on it. But let's say that if there is a way that your component, app component, identified across the browsers, so you don't have to install Angular or any other dependencies to identify it. How cool is that? So this is what it's all about, Angular elements. So when it's come to web components, there's another standard, not only in Angular, even in other frameworks, Vue, React, you can create web components. Actually, you have to use create custom element from the framework, and then you can create Angular elements from your newly created component. So if we are to talk about Angular elements, it's another 1 hour session. So I'm going to quickly go to our demo application, since it's very important to look at the source code. So actually, I thought of creating the application with you, but I think we don't have enough time for that. So let me quickly open already completed the project. Then I can go through the code. I'm going to close that playground app. So this is the one, the Ng Spotify. If you look at this app. So there are components, models, services. So there are different ways that you can structure Angular project according to enterprise standards, things like that. But this is very simple way of structuring project. In components, you can see, let me quickly run it. You can run Angular application using ng-serve. And till it's getting prepared, I'll go through the application. So here we have app component. App component HTML. If you look at app component HTML, so we have app category, and it getting looped using ng4. I think you understood about these ng4, ng kind of things in the very first session. Then it's looping this data and creating these each and every component in the HTML page. So it's running. Let me go to here. So here in this app component is the one that you are looking at right now. So it doesn't contain any like multiple items. It's just one item. You can see that this is an input parameter. We are passing data from this ng4 and passing data to app category. And if I go to category component, we have input, category item, right? And then we have output. We output in output we are emitting value when we click on view more details. So the look and feel of category component is like this. The other important thing that I forgot to mention, sorry about that. I installed another library called PrimeNG. It's very a good library with many components involved in there, many interactive components. So let me quickly go to PrimeNG and show it to you. This is the one. Many enterprise application using this component library. So there are many components in there. Basically, you can use these components out of the box, and it will save you time instead of like creating. For an example, if you are working on calendar, so then instead of creating calendar from the scratch in your code, so you can take this kind of nicely built calendar from this kind of framework. So that's about PrimeNG. And there are many libraries out there. One of my favorite libraries, PrimeNG. And again, let's go to the main application. So here, this is the category component. It's a card. So this is a P card, means it's coming from PrimeNG. So this is where if you remember that I told you there are complex applications with many modules. So here it's I introduce another module, PrimeNG module. What I do, I simply add these modules coming from PrimeNG in here, and I export those from here, PrimeNG modules. So if I go to app module, you can see that I added imports inside imports, PrimeNG module I added here. So in this way, we can separate that library components, library modules to another module, and it's easy to understand and easy to see what are the modules that we imported from that particular library. And the category about that. Then when it's come to menu component, actually it's menu. This is where that this is the one that I named as menu component. In here, we have now playing variable. If I go to let me close others and go to menu component in here. So in here now playing, we have this variable, and when something happened, there is a broadcast service listening. So this is the service that I was talking about previously, that when you need to share data between two different hierarchies, component hierarchies, this is one way of doing it. If you go to this broadcast service, here you can see I'm using RxJS subject, and there are two methods. One is subscribe and other one is broadcast. Then what we can do, we can broadcast something from the component, from a component, and we can listen to that in another component. That's the basic idea about it. And if I go to component TS, you can see no, not in there. I mean in playlist. If you go to playlist, you remember that when I click, first I click on this. This is another PrimeNG panel, side panel. When I click this play button, as soon as you can see that the top, the heading got changed. So if I go to playlist component, you can see the broadcast service. This is how you can inject service in Angular. And this broadcast service, I'm broadcasting with a key and a value, this kind of payload in here. So I'm broadcasting, and in menu component, I'm subscribed to that. So the same key on playlist select in here. I'm just using the payload and just assigning this value in here. So there are some other moving parts in this application. If you look at these other services, API service, things like that, these are the account Spotify related data, the authentication URL, client ID, and client secret. You don't have to worry about this. You can create a simple application in Spotify console, and then you can retrieve these client secret and client ID. And there are methods for, I'm using HTTP client in Angular. Actually sending the observable in here. So in this way that you can pass the type as well. If you go to Spotify service, so here I'm getting get categories. It's calling this API, and when it's retrieving the playlist, it's coming from this API. And the nice thing about these services can talk to each other. So I'm calling this API service from broadcast service, from a Spotify service here. So Spotify service is the one that I injected in components, these components. They don't have any knowledge about API service or anything. So Spotify service, when I injected there, so if I go to the app component, TS file, here you can see I injected the Spotify service, and in Spotify service, it's calling the API service. API service is responsible for setting the token, modifying the headers, things like that. It's set the headers and everything, and send the request to Spotify service and retrieve the data and send it back to Spotify service, and Spotify service send data to this relevant component. So that's all about it. I think that's pretty much it about the application that we created. Anyway, that we are going to share this application with you once this session over. So then you can go through and ask questions in our forum maybe later on. That's it, guys. Let me go to slides again. So far, any questions from you? I think I'll try to answer my best. There are any questions?
Thank you very much, Rukshan. So if there are any questions, you can post it in the chat thread or raise your hand if you want to communicate it verbally. So if you have any questions, you can post them now.
Yes, there's one question coming from one past participant. It's when to use view child. So there are ways that sometimes when you, let me quickly go back to that slide. Um, I talked about view child. So in here, let's say that if we are to get some data from a child to a parent, so we are not going to use output and emitting event from the child, but we are going to access one of properties in child. So in that way, for that kind of scenarios, we can use view child. Basically, what it does, let me quickly go to that Stackbit example as well. So then you have a better understanding of interaction. View child. So here it has this property, just this property. So maybe like when it's come to real world scenario, you may think about like you update something in here, and you update. You have a couple of buttons here, and then update it. Assign some value into this message, and you need to show it in the parent component. So at that time, it's kind of useful. This view child way of showing, way of interacting with the components. It's for that. Actually, to use this, you need to assign this message in this lifecycle hook, ng after viewing it. Otherwise, it won't work. I hope I explain it properly. And this is to be fair enough, this is not a like very common way of sharing data in Angular ecosystem. Yeah, there's another. Right. So how to identify the child and parent component? So basically, it's simple as this. So let's say that you have app component, the main component in the we call it root component. In root component, we build things up. So let's say in your application, we have a header, and inside the after the header, you have the content and the footer. Inside content, you have two sections, right? So then content is a parent. Those two sections are children of the that parent, and those two sections siblings. So I hope you got some understanding about that as well. So basically, parent is the one that we place our child component, and sibling is kind of like if we are in a same level, in a same parent, but in different roots, different component hierarchies, something like that. Any more questions, guys? I'm happy to answer. Okay, there's another interesting question coming up. Usually use router resolve to fetch data from API instead of on a lifecycle, considering user experience. Don't you think it's better to use this for API calling as much as possible? Yes, it's actually another way of doing it, but more common way of for hydrating data is calling APIs in Ng on init. But if you if you are using this method, like when you fetch data when a router resolve, it's another way of doing it. In that way, user don't see blank screen, so straight away he comes to the data. So that's the advantage. So actually, it depends on the business that you are working, like business logic and the context, basically context that you are working on. If it's mission critical, it's a application, then this kind of approach also appropriate. That's totally fine. There's no hard and fast rule that you should retrieve data on Ng on init. So you can change it to match your business context.
Right. There's another question. Bilal, am I echoing? No, right?
No, Rukshan, you are clearly audible.
Right. Okay. Right. Um, then there's another question. I'm using set message, get message, service class technique to handle RxJS. Is it good practice? Yes, that's also fine. So if you look at the demo that I showed you, it's same as the what you explained. So here I have a broadcast service. In this broadcast service, instead of set message, I have broadcast. Get message, for get message, I have this subscribe. So it's same, the concept same as pubs up. If you're coming from strongly type language like C# or Java, there is a communication method called pubs up. So this is same as pubs up, and it's totally fine. But make sure if you are using RxJS and subscribing to a particular service, make sure to unsubscribe it before you destroy the component. Otherwise, you may end up with memory leaks. I hope I answered your question as well. Uh, Actually, it's subscription. It's kind of a uh, here about subscribe. Subscribe mean that when it's come to this service, broadcast service, it's you publish something and then you're listening to that. So here I am listening it in a menu component. I subscribe to this service, and in playlist component, I am broadcasting the same event. So yes, actually, these the names. I came up with these names. Basically, broadcast and subscribe. There's no out of the box anything in Angular broadcast or there's a subscribe in RxJS observables. But these two methods I came up with just to communicate with components. That's all. So basically, that what you need to think is if you want to communicate between two components in loosely coupled ways, then there is a this is the way. So you publish something from one component to a service, and you subscribe it in another component from the same service. Actually, it's not related to same as a .NET session handling. Any more questions? It's getting pretty interesting with these questions. You're welcome, Michelle. Any more questions, guys? Yes, and one more thing, after broadcast, can we still use it? You mean the object that we sent here, or the life cycle of the service? Yes. So once we retrieve this payload from the service or from the other component, we can assign it somewhere to something in here. For an example, so we have now playing variable the property defined in this menu component, and once we received it from the subscription, we assign it to this now playing this variable, and in that way we can persist that value in here. Yes, it's possible. We can keep it like this. But if you refresh the page, or like if you destroy it, then this value getting removed from the DOM and the from the browser. So if you want to keep that as well, you have to work on some other technique. Unfortunately, here it's in memory properties and variables. You're welcome, Ishara.
If there are any further questions, you're welcome to post it in the chat thread. If there are no further questions, maybe we can conclude tonight's session, this evening session. Prior to that, let me give you a quick roundup before winding things up for this evening. We will keep you posted on the third episode of Angular 0 to 100. So as you can see, this is a 10 session program that we have going in collaboration with Ng-SriLanka. So the next session will be within 2 weeks, and we will announce updates on our social media handles on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook for Ng-SriLanka and for Ascentic. So stay in touch with us, and we'll hopefully see you in the third session. Thank you, Rukshan, for the very informative session. I myself learned a lot of things today, and I hope everyone else did as well. And thank you very much, everyone, for being here with us this evening. It was an amazing experience, and thank you very much.